Okay, welcome everyone. Sorry for that slight delay. I was having a minor issue in Visual Studio, which I will resolve very shortly. But this evening we are going to be working with palettes and frameworks, as you can see from the title of the stream. I'm going to be using a program that I tried to use on the last stream, but it didn't launch, and I was able to find out what the issue was. The issue was a missing SO file. Basically, they hit the yellow. So yeah, I downloaded it and have another installation of it that actually does work. Turns out it's very useful. So I will be demonstrating that application and also using it to give us some palettes that we will use in a CSS framework. So I'm actually going to run through some of my thought process when building a framework. I've done streams before building frameworks and such like, but today we're actually going to build one from scratch, but a little more slowly. I'm going to cover more of the ins and outs of building frameworks, like some of the decision making process and that kind of stuff. Alright, so let us jump in. So you should be able to see me shortly. I'm not seeing myself currently, so I'll probably have to figure out why I can't see me. In any case, let me get this application open and I will show you the palettes that I've created and also how this program works in a couple minutes. Alright, so it's called Colors AI. I have the Linux version, of course, because I'm on Ubuntu, so it may look a little different on Windows, although I don't think it should look too different on Windows or Mac, because it's a Flutter application, so it should look pretty much the same, I believe. Alright, so how this works, if I were to open it, it gives me a default palette, and if I press the space bar, it will refresh with a new palette that's updated. But you can lock any color by clicking on it. So like if I want to keep this one here, which I actually do like, and this one, I can lock those by clicking on them. And then when I press the space bar, it will give me an updated palette that is generated using artificial intelligence. Now, I'm not necessarily fond of the palettes it's giving me at this point in time, so I'll just keep running through until it gives me something a little nicer, because these are a little boring. Alright, maybe what I will need to do is actually choose a custom color, which you can do by clicking on the color up here, not near the lock, and then you can choose one from this color picker. Alright, so I'm going to use that and then refresh. It should start to give me some better options now. Alright, it's not updating, so probably the server, because it actually does run on a server, the server may be a little overloaded. I found last night I was able to use it for a while and then it seemed to block me, so yeah. And by the way, you should be seeing my face, but if you're not, my apologies. Oh, I now remembered why you're not seeing my face. Because my webcam is unplugged. So let me actually plug that in, and then you should be able to see my face. That's really hilarious. Here I am wondering, why can't anyone see me? Because there's no webcam, so that would tend to happen. I'm almost there. Oh great, the USB bug strikes again. You have to flip it, and then it works. Okay, good, there we are. You still can't see me though. I promise you I'm there, but for some reason I'm not visible. Alright, I will I'll get myself on camera and then I will or maybe, yeah, it doesn't seem like I'll be able to get myself on camera immediately, so forget that, we'll just get on to the fun stuff. Y'all don't need to see me today, you'll see me on YouTube at some point. Yeah, alright, so these are the palettes that I saved before. You can select any... Oops, okay, I didn't mean to remove it. I should have tested this one little piece, I didn't realize that they're just saved without you being able to select them and modify them again. I'll probably need to report a bug on that because that's a pretty bad user experience. But basically, it allows you to save them by clicking on this button here, Save Palette to Favorites. You can also share a palette, of course that's if you're actually on this view. You can share a palette by saving it as an SVG or any of these formats here, so I can have SCSS as well, which I don't use. I'm not a huge fan of SAS, so or SCSS, so you won't see me using that unless it is for, you know, another project that uses it. It's not my personal preference. But you can also share it via any of these websites here, which I don't use myself, so I'm not going to demonstrate that. But yeah, so basically that was it in terms of how this program works. Or you can also copy the SVG and any of the other formats that you get. But basically all I want to work with today is actually copying some of these colors, and I'm going to be using these in a framework. So we're actually going to open up Visual Studio Code shortly, and I will show you how to build a framework from scratch, and we will talk about some of the considerations involved. Alright, so let us go over to Visual Studio Code, and one thing I need to fix, as you can see there are 1,000,001 folders of the same name. That was completely unintentional, so I will fix that, and then we will jump into actual coding. Alright, so let me find that folder up in here somewhere. Just delete this, or better yet, let me jump right down to where this file is. Cut that. Right, here we are. And paste here. Delete you. Good. Now we're cooking with gas. Alright, so let us add some basic HTML stuff here. I forget, this needs HTML5 to give me all the fancy stuff I want. We're going to call this one Frameworks and Palettes. Now, I'm not going to add any code in here, I'll just put a to-do. Oh wait, I forget, this is not Atom, so I can't type that without installing a plugin. Alright, so to-do, add some content. We're going to spend most of our time in CSS today. You will be seeing some HTML as well at some point, but we're mostly just going to focus on the CSS. Alright, so in our CSS folder, I'm going to create a new file, and we're going to call this framework0.css. And let's just link that up over here. Good. Now the first thing before we actually jump into building this framework is that we're going to choose a palette. Hello Firefox, took a while to start. Okay Firefox, thank you very much. Okay, so oops, I didn't mean to type var there. I got distracted. That should be root and then var. So we will have, well, we don't need var here, sorry, because these are the variables. So we're gonna have some standard colors. So standard color, this is gonna be for our text. Just a second, folks. I'm gonna increase the font size here. As soon as Visual Studio Code decides to respond again, there it is. Thank you, Visual Studio Code. Taking your cool time. Right, there we go. So standard color, we're gonna pull that from this program over here. I'm going to try to find some palettes that are not completely ugly, but part of what we're going to do is actually build themes in this framework. So that's one of the first considerations that I want to mention is building of themes. So to do that, we're going to add some colors, some standard colors, and then we're going to add some classes that will actually replace those colors, and you can pull them to any part of your CSS code. Actually, let's start with this initial gray down here, which is what we would have started with when we opened the program. So I'm going to copy this color. Things are running a little slow today, I'm not sure why. Okay, Visual Studio Code has gone to sleep. Not literally, but it's acting like it. Just a second, let me check and see who is hogging the CPU. As I expected, it was Firefox to blame. Firefox was having a little moment and hogging the entire CPU, so hopefully we should have some better performance now. I'm just checking to see if the live server is still running. It should be. Okay, yeah, it is. Alright, so we're going to keep this over here, and we're going to work with this at some point. Good. Now, so this will, as I was saying earlier, this will be our standard color, this gray here. We're not going to use these as background colors, so what we're going to do is add a background color of white and then use these other grays as contrasting colors, so like buttons and different kinds of text. So one of the considerations you want to have when you're doing like a framework or anything, of course colors are like among your least important consideration, but one of the considerations you want to have from the get-go is your accessibility. You don't want to have colors that are going to be pretty much unusable or unreadable, so just a small consideration there for colors and such like. Alright, so our standard background color will be, instead of white, as I always say, we're going to use a color close to white. So let's go with 235. Oops, I just pressed the wrong key there. 235, 235, 235. And then we're going to have some extra colors. So we're going to have standard button color, which we're going to pull from here. Then we're gonna have standard muted color, which I'm actually going to pull one across, so we're not going to use this one because there wouldn't be enough contrast, so you're going to use this one here. Now I'm going to keep things simple in this framework because I'm really dealing with principles more so than with the actual content of the framework. So we're going to just leave it at a button color, a background color, a standard color, and a muted color, and then maybe like a highlighted color. So we'll have standard highlight color, and we'll go with something from one of these other palettes here that we're not actually going to use otherwise. So let's say like this color here. Now one thing I forgot to do is add these hashes, because otherwise they're not actually going to work. So let me just go back through and fix that. There we go. So no, next thing we're going to do is add some variations. Let me see if I can choose something here that looks sufficiently contrasting. Like this here is good. So this palette, no, we're going to start from here. And let's call this professional. We're going to put standard color here again. Paste that. The background color, we're going to actually, let's leave it as it was. Or maybe, yeah, let's leave it as it was. So I'm going to just go with button color instead of going with the background color, because I don't want to use white itself for the sake of our eyes. So standard button color is going to be this blue here. Standard muted color will be this color here. And standard highlight color, we'll pull in this red from here. Which, if I'm not mistaken, may actually be the very same thing we have here. Okay, no, it's different. I didn't realize it was slightly different. Looks pretty close, so. And I'm going to copy this once and create another theme. Looking for something that looks notably different. Okay, here's a good. This is a good one right here. So the background color will be this. Oops. Button color, let's go with this green right here. Muted color, we're going to go with this blue. And the highlight color, we're going to choose this yellow. That's kind of dark, but not too dark. And let's rename this to Earthen. Alright, so I'll just leave those three options there for the color scheme. Let me close this Explorer if I can. I'm looking for that thingamajiggy that allows you to resize this part of the window, but it doesn't seem to be showing yet when I put my mouse over it. Oh, there you are. It was hiding. Okay, good. There we go. Alrighty, so now we get to the real fun stuff. So when you're building a framework, obviously you have to make a number of considerations in terms of what you're going to include in it. So usually the way that I go about this is by building like a mock-up for an actual website. But in this case, I'm not going to use that method immediately. What I'm going to do instead is think of some of the standard like elements and stuff that we might use in a website, say like buttons, links, etc. And we're going to begin to style those. Now, there are two things that you usually want to think about from the get-go, which is, do you want to have a framework that works like that everything cascades, or that everything is just set on its own separately? Now, what I mean by that, and I'll demonstrate that shortly, is that where everything cascades, you might have, say, a button that's affected by a class that's on a body, or a class that's on a section, or a class that's on an article, whether that button is inside of a P element, or whether it's inside of the nav, and all these different things. And so you might have one class that shows up multiple places, both in your CSS code and your HTML code. Whereas if you're doing it where that everything is separate, you may have a separate class name for each thing. So let me demonstrate the differences between those two approaches. I'm going to add two buttons. Oops. Alright, duplicate. I'm going to add a class to this, and for the class we're going to have FW button 0 and class FW button 1. Alright, then we're going to have, just so I can demonstrate what I mean, we're going to have a nav, and in it we're going to drop FW button 0 and FW button 1. Let me just quickly style this nav. Position is going to be absolute. Well, not absolute. Let's go with fixed. Top of 0, left 0, right 0, bottom calc 100% minus 50 pixels. Display flex. Justify content. Flex end. Gap 5px. Let's make that bigger. Now I'm going to set up some standard style so these buttons are not completely ridiculous looking. So width for all buttons, we'll set that, or let me use minimum width instead. Minimum width for all buttons, we'll set that to something like, say, 100 pixels. And minimum height, we're going to set to 50 pixels. Good. And now for the actual classes. Now I can actually demonstrate what I was describing earlier. So let's say for FW button 0, this is one that will use the first method, which is that where it is located in your code will actually determine its behavior and its look and everything like that. So let's say that you have FW button 0 by itself. Background color will be var button color, well, standard button color. and color will be var highlight, standard highlight color. So let's add some content to these buttons as well. This is a little trick for when you're doing stuff like demos and you want some filler text. You can use CSS to fill all your buttons with text. So I'm gonna add content, blah blah blah. There we go. Now all of our buttons have the same text. Alright, so highlight color may not be the best thing for this. Let's give them a different look. Alright, standard BG color is good for that. Should give us enough contrast. There we go. Right, so at this point, FW button 0 will have this style, and let's also give a style to FW button 1. So, oops, I didn't mean to open the MDN. I keep clicking on the MDN reference when I don't want it. I wonder if there's a way to turn that off. It's useful, but right now I don't need it. Alright, so FW button 1 and FW button 0, we're going to share styles between them. And let's say that we... Hello, Firefox. Alright, just kill Firefox. So, let's say that we wanted to have the FW button 0 change whenever it's in a nav. So, I'm going to put nav FW button 0 here and change the background color to highlight color. Right. So now, anytime that FW button 0 appears in the nav, it's going to change its style. And then we could also say we want to change it when it is in a P element. So let's say when it's in the P element that its height becomes, our minimum height becomes like about 75 pixels or something. Right, so this is basically just a very simplistic demonstration of what I'm talking about in terms of the different methods that you can use when you're building a framework, or the different approaches you could use in building a framework, how your elements behave and how you're going to assign different styles to your elements, either using a cascade or just having them be standalone. So a real life demonstration of what I'm talking about there could be like in Bootstrap, if I remember correctly. Haven't touched Bootstrap in a little while, but if I remember correctly, in Bootstrap it works sort of like this with both methods, but depending on the element you're using. Another real world example would be my own framework, Annul, which uses the first method, which is that, oops, it was right there, I didn't mean to search, which is that when an element is in a different part of the page, it will adjust how it looks. So let me demonstrate to you what I mean. Like if you look in here, these are actually, well, these here are submenus, but like these two are links, I believe, or buttons, and all of these would be using a button class as well. And if I go to buttons and menus, you'll see how different they look in here. So here's a button that is inside of the AN body content area. Then these are just different styles you can apply to them as well. Then here's another kind of button. These are menu buttons, of course. And you see how they change depending on where they are. I don't have any buttons down here. I probably should add that to the documentation at some point to show you how they look, but even in the tail section of this framework, buttons change their appearance. So that's how the first method would work. But if you're using, say, like a utility framework like Tailwind, for instance, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Tailwind uses the second method, which would be that it is just basically determined by the class itself, so it doesn't matter where you put it or what it is included inside of. So that's how this second class here, FW button 1, is supposed to function. So let's say that we wanted to change the style of FW button 1 inside of the nav. We would have to have a second class, so like say a utility class like BG Blue or something, and then we could pull in one of these variables here. So standard button color is. So let's change standard button color to like blue or something for BG Blue. And then if we add that utility class, that's how we would be changing this button. And I mean, you could use this on pretty much any of them, because it should do the same here. Right. I didn't mean to add 1 to that. Right. You can override with utility classes like this, but if you got really specific, like if you made your selectors for like say when a button is inside of a P element or nav element or whatever, extremely specific, you could even override utility classes without using important. But I'm not going to cover that today, just saying that's a possibility, but not recommended. And the reason I don't recommend doing that is because it can create some bugs and complications over time. Like when I'm building frameworks, sometimes I do make that mistake, and then I end up with a bug and I'm trying to figure out where did I put this and where did I put that. So basically just avoid doing that if you can. You can still write stuff like this here, which is technically, well, some people would say it's writing bad CSS, but it's not bad, it's just a preference, and that preference depends on what you're trying to achieve and how you want your framework to work. That's kind of redundant, but yeah, how you want your framework to work is what would make you decide to go that route or not. Alright, so on to some other stuff. I'm trying to think of other because I didn't really have like notes of this, so I'm trying to think of some other details that I should warn you about straight off the bat. I do have a dev post coming on this that's a little more organized, obviously. This is kind of a relaxed stream for me today. Anyway, enough about that. So let's say I wanted to change how all these buttons look at once without having to recode everything. This is why I would have written these classes here. So these change our variables at the root level. So we can add class to the body, and let's say we were to go with professional. Right, changes the appearance of everything, but you will notice something has not changed though, and that is these two here, because their selectors are a little more specific. So this method that I showed you earlier, which is that everything cascades, as you can see, it already creates a little bit of a challenge, and that's that you have to end up coding a little extra to fix problems like this. But that can actually work in your favor, because let's suppose that you're building a utility framework and you want to have it that BG Blue always means that your background is blue. Just leave it as is. However, if you wanted to use the previous method that I mentioned about everything cascades and stick to it, you just have to add professional BG Blue and go from there. And then change like the background for this, well, the variable that's inside of this, to something else. So like standard button color could be, I'm gonna pull a blue from up here somewhere. Like let's say we went with this muted color right here. Cool thing with CSS variables is I could pull another variable from something else. So let's say I wanted to change that behavior even more. I could have gone with standard muted color, and it will pull from whatever it is that professional uses for the muted color, which is of course that same color we had just now. Forgot to add var to this, by the way. Great, so nothing really changed there. But let's say I took this out. Let me take that out as well, because that's going to be redundant. Right, so now I don't need to add the professional part to that. BG Blue will change to something else, which is in this case standard muted color. Anyway, I'm going to set that back to how we had it. Right. Oops, didn't mean to change you. Good. Alright, so the next consideration, of course, is what elements do we actually want to... I would have mentioned this earlier, but what elements do we actually want to have in our framework? Like, what's going to be absolutely essential to style? Well, there are certain things that you should typically consider first, as I said, like your buttons, your navs, all that stuff. But there are some other things that you may not think of, like typography and stuff like that. You can set that up from the get-go. So, and I always would recommend this, as this is a mistake I've been making recently. I always recommend like setting your fonts and stuff from the jump, because you will find that different browsers have different font styles. So something I would recommend, use a custom font if you can, because basically, like, if you go from Google Chrome to Firefox, you'll notice that even if you set to sans serif, the fonts can kind of look completely different, especially across different platforms, which is a rather frustrating issue. Like, if you're on Linux or you're on Windows or you're on Mac, each of them has different standard fonts. Each browser then uses its own choice of which standard fonts to use for each particular standard style, like sans serif or cursive. Some browsers don't support cursive, some browsers do, all that stuff. So I would suggest always use a custom font if you're building like a framework or anything like that, or at least grab a font list that you can always have a standard look across different platforms. But if you're going to use that method, I will warn you though that operating systems are updated pretty regularly, and so let's say if you chose like Bitstream Charter or something, so, or you chose Verdana, and then the operating system gets updated in 2 years, your CSS framework is still out there floating around the internet, and now your font that you would have coded for is no longer being pulled. So your websites or websites developed with your framework look completely different. So yeah, that's why I would suggest use a custom font always. Now, I'm pretty fond of stuff like Open Sans, for instance, not just because it's an open source font, but because it looks pretty good. And Roboto is also nice. But yeah, I'm going to just use Open Sans today to save myself some trouble. Let's also set the font size as well by default. Something like 13 px should be good. Okay, that's still a little small. I want it bigger than that. Alright, 14 is good. Let's also get our usual bot sizing and... Whoops. And our margin and padding as well. Now you notice that reset our buttons over here, but that's not a big deal. And our P as well, P element as well. Oh, this brings me to another thing that I should have mentioned from the beginning, and we're also going to set that up. in our variables. Spacing is another thing you want to consider when you're building a framework. You want to usually have some standard values that you work with that remain consistent throughout the framework. So like with a null, for instance, I use 15 pixels and 35 pixels for most things in terms of like padding and margins and stuff like that. So you'll notice that throughout this, I need to fix these labels here. But this is just the documentation page itself that I need to fix, not the actual CSS code, because these should come to a new line on this screen size. But anyway, side issue. You'll notice that the spacing between these elements remains pretty consistent. Like no matter what you're looking at, it remains consistent, and that is because I chose a particular set of spacing from the get-go and kept it consistent throughout the building of the entire framework. And I would suggest, in cases like that where you want to keep certain consistency, use a variable and just copy that to everything, basically. So let me add a comment here, and then we're gonna add a variable. Now you can have another method I like to use. You can have like, or you can identify is the word I should use, not that you can have, but you can identify certain elements that should share properties. So like buttons or clickable links and stuff like that. That not just clickable links, but links that should be like style like a button or anything like that. You can decide you're gonna have any actionable elements or whatever using the same padding, same spacing, same margins, typography, etc. So you can set up variables for them as well. So I'm gonna actually have action component here, standard action component. Now, let me just put CP to keep things short. And we're gonna go with 20 by 15. Oops. And then we're gonna pull that in for our buttons. Right. Now for the nav, any element within that, of course, we're going to want to turn off the margin on that. So let me just fix that quickly. I'm going to actually add a variable for this as well. Now you may be wondering, why add another variable here, because that seems to complicate things. Well, there's another benefit for variables, which is that, say you wanted to have a style that can change for different conditions. So like, say if you were on a mobile device and you wanted to change it only on mobile devices, obviously you can add a media query and then you can rewrite all your rules and stuff like that. Or you could add your media query and just change one single variable, which makes life a whole lot easier. So that's what we're going to do. Let me just make sure I have that correct. Okay, cool. I may have an issue with my specificity here, so let me just double check. could also be the cascade. Although, if I'm being specific enough, the cascade won't matter, but let me just make sure I didn't. Yeah, okay, it was the cascade in this case. See, this is where CSS can confuse people a little bit, because sometimes the specificity of your selectors is identical, and it's just a matter of where you put things in the code. So just a small little tip for anyone who ever gets confused. If you want something to be more not specific but to matter more in CSS, put it at the bottom of the file, because the lower it is in the file, the higher it is in its importance. And the higher it is in the file, lower it is in importance. With one small exception, which is media queries, because those can be overridden, can override the position of something within your CSS, because they can technically increase specificity, but depends as well. Because, like, say if you put something inside of another media query lower down in the file, and the specificity happens to be lower, it's not going to be overridden. So, yeah, I can understand sometimes why people get a little frustrated with CSS, because it is a pretty confusing language. It actually is more logical than it looks, but it can be a little bit confusing. Let me actually set display flex on these and align items center. Right. I just realized something though. Setting display flex made these come down. I wonder if I changed something unintentionally. Okay, wait, so water. That's interesting. I've never actually noticed that behavior before, but yeah. Let me double check and see what's going on here. Interesting. I guess because these are not within a container, they're being treated as if they cover a whole block. Probably just the way how Chrome functions versus Firefox. I'm not testing that right now because Firefox is running a little slow. But this is a little reminder as to why you need to test in multiple browsers, because there will always be quirks. And that's one of the things that can get, again, a little bit frustrating with using CSS, and especially when you're like building a framework or anything, because you have to be testing for every possible variable that can pop up in different browsers, etc. Right, I need to add some padding on this side of these buttons too, by the way, so let me get that sorted. Alright, 20 is a bit much. Like 18 should do the trick. Good, there we go. I just remembered too, I have not been checking the chat, so I hope I didn't miss anybody today. Okay, I don't see anybody in chat. And I hope there was nobody talking to me on Twitter, because I was not on Twitter checking either. Oops. Now, okay, let's get on to some other elements that we might want to add to our framework, like standard stuff we might want to drop in here. So let's say you want to style some links. Oops. I went typing CSS inside of my HTML. I'm too accustomed to CSS. Alright, I'm going to move some stuff around because, as you can see, the font size is still a bit on the tiny side. So let me move this up to body. Okay, it didn't actually change it. Interesting. That wouldn't happen in Firefox, if I'm not mistaken. Just Chrome and its quirks. Yeah, that font size is still tiny for that particular element. Anyway. Now for links, you might want to remove like your text decoration and stuff like that. Some people don't recommend it for accessibility reasons. Personally, I don't usually use text decoration as my means of determining what a link should look like. So I'm going to turn it off. Color, we're going to use var standard, standard highlight color. Now a little thing here, I know I'm kind of being a little random at this point, but just a little note, giving you notes as I go, as things come to mind, basically. So with things like links, one of the considerations you want to make is that things should be consistent, not only in terms of appearance, like layouts and stuff like that, but also function, because you're not just considering, you know, like how things are aesthetically, but how your users will experience your framework. So one of the ways you can do that is like, take for instance with like links, you can have them share the same color as your buttons, or you can have them share the color that a button would have when it's highlighted, so that a user knows that, hey, if I click on this thing, something's going to happen. So in this case, I'm going to use the highlight color for the for our links as the main color, and then when they're hovered, I'm actually going to give them a special little bit of decoration, but we're not going to use text decoration for that. We are going to use a pseudo element. So I'm going to teach you a little trick here that I like to use in place of text decoration. Oh wait, I forgot to put position relative on the parent element. Position absolute. Let's go with top 100%, or better yet, 105%. Height, we're gonna make that 2 pixels. Left 5%, right 5%. Content will be nothing at all. Background color, var standard highlight color. There it is. Opacity 0. Opacity 1. Let's also add a transition here. Transition all 0.25 seconds, ease in out. Alright, that's a little fast, so I'm going to slow it down. You can tweak that as much as you want. That was basically just a demonstration of a method that I like to use. Let me add some lorem ipsum text to this and also drop all this stuff inside of a p element. Well, first section p, or section article, oops, article p. We're going to style that section shortly too. Now there's a reason too, by the way, why I'm not doing this framework like I normally do frameworks, which is to build an actual mock-up of a website and then fill in pieces as we go. Because I'm basically trying to focus on the actual elements that make up the framework. So I'm working differently than I normally would, and my brain is working differently than I normally would, so if things seem a little random, that's why. Alright, here we go. I should probably change the line height on stuff like this here. We're gonna sort it out shortly. Right, but for those who probably would have gone here late if you're now watching, let me just reiterate. When you're building a CSS framework, I believe I mentioned this earlier, but if I didn't mention it for the first time anyway, so yeah. When you're building a CSS framework, what you're basically doing is building the building blocks that will allow you to build any website with that particular CSS code, or sometimes some extra JavaScript code maybe thrown in there. But you're building the building blocks that will allow you to build any website you want with it later on. So it doesn't need to follow any particular layout. It can follow, you know, all sorts of layouts or whatever. The real thing is to give people the building blocks. And as I was saying earlier, there are two approaches you can use, which is that where things fall in your code is going to determine how they function, how they look, everything. Or you can have separate classes for each duty, which would be how the utility classes, for instance, work in frameworks like Tailwind and a few others. And you can also use the method like how Bootstrap does it, which is kind of mixing and matching. It's not quite a utility framework because it gives you some pretty well-defined structures of how things should look, and you know, like how to build components, etc. But yeah, so basically what we're doing today, I'm showing you some of the very basic stuff in terms of what it would require for you to build a framework or to build the building blocks. I'm not trying to give you the full rundown of how to build your own framework, so to speak. That I'm reserving for a dev post because I started to write it and hope to get back to it at some point soon. Yeah. Alright, so let's jump back in to the flow of my randomness today. I'm gonna style this section and article. And I'm also going to style a p element within an article. So section margin will be standard. Oops, I keep forgetting to add var. Standard margin. Padding will be var standard padding. Article, I'm gonna give it a border of 1px solid var standard color. Let's actually use calc for this, so calc var standard padding by 2. There we go. Or maybe even bigger than that. How about by 3? Yeah, that's good. Alright, we're gonna use display flex on this. Now, just to explain my thought process here, a section is usually the semantic element for containing or highlighting a part of your page that is self-contained. Then an article would be like something you want to highlight as it is still self-contained, but it is about a particular subject, for instance. So when you're styling those particular things, you could obviously have different classes to style them. In this case, we're not going to do that because I'm just keeping it very basic and simple. So just going to give you a rundown of how you might think of wanting to style these. So your section, usually you don't really want that to be visible. It's kind of like a div anyway. So usually it's not going to be visible unless, of course, you are that's your purpose and that's how you want to build it. In this case, I chose to just leave it as invisible. It's just going to serve for the purpose of layout. The article will actually be visible, so that's why I gave it a border. I should also give it a margin now I think about it. So the article, seeing as it will be a piece of visual data, if you will, tells the user this particular thing stands out. I'm gonna have it have some spacing and a border, and I'm also going to set it so that its container will arrange the articles automatically. So flex flow for this one will be row and wrap. I'm going to duplicate this article, of course. And I forgot to give these a width. So max width. Instead of max width, I could use, I don't remember, there's a flexbox property I can use. That is, I believe it is it just flex? Let me test that. Yes, there we go. Sorry, flex 1 on these. And if I remember correctly, right, that it will still take up the full amount of space there. Alright, let me go with 2. Alright, that doesn't work like I wanted to. Alright, so in this case, I'm actually going to use minimum width, should I? I could use grid for this too, but I won't. I'm trying to remember, there's a way. Oh, I think I know what I'm going to use for this. I'm going to use not. Although this is not recommended, I'm going to be lazy today and not try to figure this out. So, not only child. Right, there we go. Much better. So now if I were to take these back out, it should give me good, there we go. It gives me the behavior I was looking for. Good. I was gonna set style on the P element inside of, oh yeah, I still will. This is only for demo purposes, because of course you don't really need to do this, but I'm gonna just set a background color on these and a color as well. So var standard color and color. This is absolutely unnecessary, but just to show you, you could choose to style these separately from the P element up here. But that's totally unnecessary, so I'm going to take it back out today. Yeah, not necessary, like I said, just a proof of concept kind of thing. Alright, so let's say we wanted to add a button that can float above these. You can choose to style your well, you can choose to select that button using a class. So let's say we had article button. Some people would use an underscore for that. Me personally, I don't really care. I just use the dash. But yeah, we're gonna call this article button and position it absolutely. And I'm also going to add a button down here that doesn't have a class. Right. Alright, I was just checking something there because I wasn't seeing the behavior I was expecting from this one over here. Just want to double check on that. I'm trying to remember, there's a way to center text on block level elements, I believe, if I remember correctly. I can't remember. Anyway, that's no big deal. Sorry, we can have this button float above the rest of this. So what I'm actually going to do is to put some more text in here. Right, no, it floats above it, as I said. Right, so we can have different options, either that you just, if you drop a button in, this is how it functions. And then you can also have a class for that, or I could choose to override this, take out the class, and have all buttons function like that, which I don't really want to do, obviously, because as you can imagine, this would create a problem if you wanted to have multiple buttons. But yeah, point is, this is another option you could have as to how you could choose to display your wheel within a wheel, so to speak. I just felt like saying that. But this is how you could choose to display this particular element, which is similar to what I did with a null over here. Different buttons, well, the same button class in different places will determine how it works. Let me see if I had any more of these buttons anywhere. I can't remember if I did. At least not on this documentation page. I know I wrote it that way. I don't remember if I actually included it. But yeah, this page was to be rewritten. Oops. Yeah, that page definitely needs rewriting because that's the wrong thing, basically. That was the wrong link. Alright, here we go. These aren't showing you buttons, but basically, I believe it's here. Alright, I'm not remembering my own documentation because I haven't looked back at it in a little while, but there are certain elements when, or well, certain classes, sorry, when they're put within other classes that will function completely differently in a null, similar to what I would have been demonstrating or talking about over here. You can choose how your components will work in different places, etc, etc. Anyway, I am running out of randomness today. And this may not be my most useful stream today because I've been taking it easy on the preparation side of things, but I hope you were still able to get something out of this, even though I slowed it down a bit today and you know, took it easy, not doing my usual designing of a template and stuff like that, which was my original plan. So what I'm gonna do actually before we go, I'm gonna turn this randomness I was doing with this here into an actual template, and then I'm gonna log off. So let me just double check stuff over here. Alright, these are gonna need to go into something. Let me drop in a header. I did this one for fun, obviously, hero worship. We're gonna drop a header up here. Let me drop another header there too as a title, by the way. This one will be class. That'll be hero. This one will be, oops. This one will be the title. Do I need anything at all? Let me add a footer as well. I'm writing CSS one more time. I am so stuck on CSS right now that I started writing it in my HTML code. Y'all pray for me. Alright. Button. FW button 0. Whoops. 0. Come on. I keep typing the wrong thing by accident. Alright, I don't think I need any other stuff around here. In fact, I'll add one more thing. Just for fun, I'm going to add an aside as a sidebar. And we're going to have some fun with this, but I'm not going to say what that is yet. I'm just going to demonstrate in the CSS. So, let me turn this randomness into something that actually looks cool. So first things first, we're going to start with the header for the title. Well, right, so title, forgot that's a class, title. We're going to put that as position fix and all this here we can probably copy over. So I'm going to move all of these up. And add Left is the one we're going to take out for the nav. Put that as 10%. Alright, did I do this correctly? Missing one thing here, I believe. Alright, title, position fix, that's correct. Top is correct, bottom is correct, display effects correct. Oh, justify content and should be on the nav only. My mistake. Where is the body? If I had added body here somewhere. Okay, so let me just drop in the body. Give it a margin at the top of 50 pixels and rest is 0. Alright, so the next class we're going for now. What did we call it again? Oh yeah, it was hero. In fact, no. I'm going to position this using Flexbox instead. I'm going to change the buttons inside of this so that they're transparent. And border 1px solid var Alright, that aside that we talked about, we're gonna style that now. So background color on that will be var standard color with 50%. Did I add a class to this? Let me just double check. Okay, cool. Height. 100%. Where are you aside I'm not seeing? Oh, it's all the way down there. I forgot I need to position this. Is it inside of something? Shouldn't be. Right, it's not inside of anything. Okay, cool. I do not recommend using Unicode figures or characters, I should say, like what I'm doing here. This is just for demo purposes. Alright, so we're now going to move this downward. Top of about 25%, bottom same 25%. In fact, I'm not going to need transform on this. Let me take that back off. Right. In fact, let's go with 0. Good, that's pretty much what I want right there. Okay, yeah, I did need transform because I remember this not going to add. Then again, wait, I don't remember you can add a new line to these like this. Forgot that completely. Can you? Okay, maybe not. Let me double check this quickly. I'm pretty sure you can add new lines in content. Okay, I had the wrong thing. Did I? I need a space. And I probably also need this white space thingy. Yeah. CSS and its complications that no one can remember. There we go. Not quite perfect, but pretty close to what I want. So now let's see if I can make this function as I'm thinking in my head. I know I haven't revealed to you what I plan to do with this yet, but it should be pretty cool once I get it to actually work. There we are. Okay, that MDN reference thing is slightly annoying. No, it'd be really cool if you could define the same value for properties by doing like how you might have a comma in your selectors. Just put a comma in some properties and put the same value. That would be so cool. Alright, I need to fix this section. Next time I'm teaching frameworks, I'm probably going to just use this method from the get-go, which is what I was going to do originally today, and then I changed my mind for whatever reason. But basically, when I'm building frameworks, I do like if I'm building a template, and then after I've added a whole bunch of random things, I start removing them from the actual pages I'm building, and maybe like try adding some variations and stuff like that, see what I can come up with. And usually that gives me some pretty good results, because you get to cover a lot of ground in terms of what you should be offering within an actual framework. Alright, that's fixed. Now let's fix that footer. Alright, so the footer, I'm not going to give it a position. I was going to, but I'm not going to give it a position. I'm just going to set this to display flex. We're going to set the muted color on this one. Var, standard muted color. Good. This P up here, I'm not going to do anything with that, probably just remove it altogether. That was for demo purposes earlier. And we've already figured out how the functionality of elements should be within that element. Alright, I don't think we need to add anything else to this for now. But basically that should give you an idea of building a framework. I know it was kind of disjointed because I didn't really plan too much for this part of it. I had a jam session today and I've been taking it easy, so this stream was a little less organized, but I hope you still got something out of it. And next time, I'm not sure if I'm covering CSS or not. I mean, it's getting late in the year and I'm kind of taking it easy on the planning side of things, but you can be looking out for more tutorials to land soon. I have a Flexbox layout tutorial already recorded that's coming very soon, and some more dev tool content as well is coming very shortly. Some I've started to write, some I've written already and just haven't put out there. So yeah, I'm planning to do some design tips as well, to cover some basic design tips that you may not regularly think about, and whatever else comes to mind. Hope you enjoyed this. Like I said, if you have any questions on frameworks, like building frameworks and stuff, it's kind of a haphazard process, or at least it feels like it at first. But once you start to get the hang of it, you realize that it actually is a lot more structured than it appears. So maybe in a future stream, when I do some more proper planning, I will cover some more details of building frameworks and some of the decision-making process that goes into it. I'll actually have notes in a future stream. Today did not have any notes. I just kind of winged it. And I often wing it when I'm designing too, but in future I'm going to cover framework development and design and stuff like that, and some of the, as I said, some of the considerations that you may need to make in more detail. Anyway, you can check out my YouTube channel for educational content, my YouTube store, not YouTube's, my stores. I kind of botched that one just now. You can check out my stores: Gumroad, Spring, Redbubble. Do I have any others? Basically, just check out my streaming page and look for all my links, because I have so many that it's hard to remember them all. But yeah, I am Roland Taylor, aka Roland Dixar. Hope you enjoyed all this rambling and randomness and and stuff like that, and see you all next week.